Part 149. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1481. Fourth Sister Yin and Fifth Sister Yin blushed. Man Bao didn't mind. Seeing how embarrassed they wanted her to look, he simply took their hands and felt a pulse. Everyone quieted down. Man Bao felt their pulse and was slightly surprised. You guys are in good health. She glanced at Lu Lirong and the others who were looking at them, took back her hand and said with a smile, very healthy. I have seen the pulse of so many people, and your pulse is rare. Fourth Sister Yin smiled and said, Grandma has always been very careful about our bodies. More than being very careful, Man Bao thought, they must have been conditioning their bodies all the time, so that the foundation could be adjusted so well. And they haven't accumulated any poisons yet. It seems that the people who are conditioning them are paying attention to this aspect. But this is a person's privacy, so she didn't say anything in front of Lu Lirong and others, and when she avoided them, she pulled the two of them and asked, who is conditioning your body? I found that you have always had. Are you taking medicine? Fourth Sister Yin blushed and nodded, and whispered, it's the old Dr. Tan. Grandma asked the old doctor to take care of us. Mrs. Yin felt that a large part of the reason for Yin Or's body was related to her daughter-in-law's body, so in order to prevent her granddaughters from following her daughter-in-law's footsteps, she always paid attention to conditioning their bodies. Don't look at Yin or various problems that Yin Li gave birth to, but the children born by the eldest sister Yin, the second sister Yin and the third sister Yin after marrying into their in-laws are all healthy. In this regard, Man Bao only muttered, if you have a boy or a girl, it depends on the man. Fourth Sister Yin was stunned for a moment, and was about to ask in detail when Zhou Lyra caught up and said, little aunt, there are many guests in front of you. Man Bao hurriedly bid farewell to the front. The Sun family, Zhang family, and Du family also came to congratulate, but they happened to meet people from the East Palace, and the front yard was very lively. Eunuch Wu personally came to give gifts. In addition to the congratulations from the prince and the concubine, he also handed over the congratulations from Princess Changjiao and Princess Mingda. Eunuch Wu said with a smile, before coming, the princesses said that your majesty would not allow them to leave the palace, otherwise they would have to come in person. Mrs. Du, who was on the side, was secretly glad to hear that, thanks to her coming, Zhou Man had more face than they thought. Man Bao received the gift, and after thanking him, he invited Eunuch Wu to have a drink too. Eunuch Wu declined, and pulled Man Bao aside and said, my little ancestor, if you don't want to enter the palace, you won't enter the palace. Even if you don't see a doctor for His Highness, you should go to the palace every 3 to 5 to see the crown princess, right? Man Bao, is the fetus of the crown princess bad? Ba ba ba, Tong Yanwuji is blown away by the strong wind, Eunuch Wu whispered a few times, the prince's palace and the queen concubine have both sent a maid to the crown prince, plus the imperial doctor is watching. It's down. I didn't see anything wrong, but the empress was uneasy, and it may be that she was uncomfortable with the little emperor, and she was in a bad mood these few days. Eunuch Wu lowered his voice and said, your highness means, don't you want to use palace servants in the East Palace to train your apprentices? You still go into the palace, and the people in this palace can do whatever you want, just the one in the East Palace. In the side hall, it's just that when you enter the palace, please go and greet the highness and the crown princess. Said to be safe, but in fact, it was to check their pulse and check if there was any problem around them. Ever since the poison stone was placed beside him, the prince has always been a little suspicious. Sometimes he would have to call an imperial doctor if he changed his clothes to a different kind of incense. Man Bao thought of the slow progress of the acupuncture skills of Lu Yingnu and others, and immediately nodded, this is what you said, then I will go to the palace tomorrow to ask the princess to be safe. Man Bao was already making an abacus in his heart, I don't want too much. When I enter the palace the next day, you can tie 20 people to me. Eunuch Wu wanted to tell her that he could find more people for her. But thinking that this kind of thing has to be tricky, and that there are too many people who are dispatched to inject needles, which delays other work, and they are investigated. If this matter is not cancelled, I am afraid they will all have to be held accountable. So he nodded. Man Bao became happy and whispered, I have 4 apprentices now, can I bring them all into the palace? That won't work, can you bring at most 2 at a time? Man Bao was entangled, this way, the progress will be much slower. If you want to learn, let's learn together. My niece can still slow down. She hasn't started to memorize the AIC appointment map, but Zhenggu and the others can do it directly. Then ask for the grace of your highness. Man Bao thought for a moment and said, okay, I will go to the palace tomorrow to ask His Royal Highness for grace. Eunuch Wu was also happy. After all, when Zhou Man entered the palace, although he was trying out the palace people, they also had an extra guarantee, right? The palace servants are sick, but few can see the doctor and take medicine. As soon as he was happy, Eunuch Wu accidentally missed something, and he said, I listened to His Highness. It seems that His Majesty intends to reorganize the Imperial Physician's Office as written in your book, and let the Imperial Physician's Office recruit students to study medicine at that time. Man Bao was stunned for a moment, his heart pounding, really? Eunuch Wu froze, realizing that he had said something he shouldn't have said, but when he met Man Bao's bright eyes, he gritted his teeth and nodded, lowered his voice and said, of course it's true, Your Highness wants to talk about this matter. Taking it over and forming it together with Chongguan Pavilion will also be a merit at that time. Dr. Zhou Xiao, His Highness is still discussing this matter with His Majesty, and even the ministers in the court don't know about it, so. Man Bao immediately said, don't worry, I won't tell anyone, and I will never spread it. Eunuch Wu breathed a sigh of relief and laughed again, if the Imperial Physician Office can be built, Dr. Zhou's merits will be immeasurable in the future. My family heard that His Majesty has made you a 5th grade official uniform. Bai Shan and Thursday Lang arranged for the Zhang family and others who came to the door. When he turned around and found that Man Bao was still talking to Eunuch Wu, he couldn't help shaking his head. On Saturday, Lang came out of the kitchen and was about to go back to the house to change his clothes. When he saw the liveliness, he came over and took a look. When he was looking out, he happened to see the Chiu family's father and daughter standing outside. A handful of Thursday. 4th brother, my future husband-in-law is here. Thursday Lang looked out, immediately pleaded guilty to Sun Saburo, dragged Saturday Lang out and quickly walked out, oh, my in-laws are here, please come in, please come in. When Man Bao heard the voice, he turned his head to look and saw Chiu Pei. He quickly nodded with Eunuch Wu to welcome him out, grabbed Chiu Pei's hand and said with a smile, Sister Chiu, you are here, please come in, Lejun and the others are here. The backyard. Seeing the enthusiasm of the Zhou brothers and sisters, the old man Chiu slowly let go of the heart he was holding. His already red face turned even redder. He was ashamed. He seemed to have thought too much before. He glanced at the door, a little embarrassed, we came in a hurry, and we didn't bring any gifts. Thursday Lang laughed and said, it is the best gift to have my in-laws here. What kind of gift is there? Lu Lang, please invite your husband in, Man Bao, and take Mrs. Chiu to play later. I'm so tired today, so I won't add more, I'll add more tomorrow, so see you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1482. On Saturday, Lang and Man Bao responded, one invited the old man Chiu in, and the other pulled Chiu Pei in. Entering the courtyard, Thursday Lang also introduced the old man Chiu generously. The old man Chiu completely let go of his heart, smiled and bowed to others, and then went to the side courtyard with Saturday Lang. Saturday Lang explained, I just came out of the kitchen, I have to change my clothes first. The old man Qiu asked, "Do you still need to cook for your family's banquet?" "I made 2 dishes, and the rest were made by Aunt Rong and other cooks," Saturday Lang said with a smile. "Mrs. Lu also invited a chef from the outside tavern to cook, so you can try the dishes later. How about it?" The old man Qiu looked around and sighed. "Your family lives in Chongyuan Square, are you still a cook?" Saturday Lang looked confused. "If I don't become a cook, I can't do anything else. Can't I be a cook if I live in Kongai Yuanfeng?" When the old man Qiu heard this, his heart became more stable. He smiled and nodded and said, I can do it, it's my fault, ha ha ha." Although the restaurant of Lao Zhou's family is open these days, it seems to be very busy. It is obvious that the people on Thursday have arrived in the capital, but they have not come to propose marriage. In the first month of the first month, after Friday Lang went to Beijing, he told their family that the old Zhou family had already agreed to their conditions, but he was a little young, and he had to wait until Thursday Lang arrived before he could propose marriage. However, although it has not been officially decided, the marriage between the two is recognized by both parties, and the merchants halfway down the street know that the two are going to marry. But on Thursday, Lang came to Beijing for 2 days. Not only did he not come, but on Friday, Lang also disappeared. On Saturday, Lang stayed in the restaurant next door every day and did not go out. They were women, so it was not easy to rush to mention them. It wasn't until Saturday when Lang sent them an invitation, and they took the post all the way into the inner city, and then to Chongyuan Square. If nothing else, the heart was getting more and more uneasy, and they couldn't help but feel cool. I thought the marriage that was so easy to agree on was gone again. On Saturday, Lang took him to the side yard, and Mrs. Lu was playing in the yard with 3 children. "Sister-in-law 5, this is Uncle Qiu. Say hello first." "I'll change clothes." Mr. Lu responded, and hurriedly asked the old man Qiu to sit down, and then went to pour tea. The old man Qiu was afraid that the old Zhou family would regret it. The old Zhou family actually wanted to settle the marriage earlier, and was also afraid that Saturday Lang's marriage would blow up. After all, he is not too young, and his marriage in the past 2 years has almost become the heart disease of the old Zhou family. Originally, Thursday, Lang was thinking of waiting for his daughter-in-law to recover before coming to propose marriage, but since the old man Qiu is here today, he will take the opportunity to mention it, and he will officially come to propose marriage after Fang's illness is cured. The housewarming banquet of the Zhou family really covered all classes, including old man Qiu, shopkeeper Zhengde and others, as well as Mr. Zhuang's friend Mr. Zhang and others, classmates of Zhou Lixiu and others, and in the Imperial Academy. Classmate, son of an aristocratic family, and the young master of Sun Gui's family. The back house is okay, but the front yard is extensive. Fortunately, the place is big enough, and Mrs. Lu arranged the seats early, and the old man Qiu, the shopkeeper Zhengde and others sat together, and they became enthusiastic after a while. Not so cold. The 3 families of Sun, Zhang, and Du, who were not very familiar with them, sat next to Master Tang, and they would not be left out in the cold. After all, they were also neighbors, and they often met at various official banquets on weekdays. Bai Dalan also invited his classmates to come, but everyone is not familiar with them, and he has heard some people's names in school on weekdays. For example, Bai Shan, who is very famous in Qiaozijian now, there are no students in the whole Qiaozijian who don't know him. For example, Yin Or, he is also very famous. After all, as soon as he entered the school, he was on the top of the list that must not be approached or made friends. Another example is Ji Hao, as the young grandson of the former left minister, he was also very famous when he entered school halfway. By the way, Ji Xiang was appointed to the post, and he submitted the book twice. The first time the emperor retained his intentions, and the second time he agreed. He is still the minister of the left, but he basically handed over his work to others, and he didn't even go to court. I heard that after explaining the things in his hand, he still wanted to write a letter and return to his hometown. This pair of monarchs and ministers broke up peacefully. In the previous paragraph, the dragon raised his head, and the emperor still remembered Ji Xiang's achievements in the early years. However, I heard that Ji Hao's father Ji Xiang was released, and I don't know if there is any chance to return to the capital. When Bai Shan mentioned this, he said to Man Bao, "The emperor's mouth is a liar, so don't believe any golden words when you enter and leave the palace. The emperor is used to deceiving people." I am so thankful to Ji Xiang for mentioning his son in the 6th division, but it was released. Obviously, His Majesty still cares about what the Ji family did in Yazhu city. Bai Shan didn't think that the emperor did something wrong and that Ji Xiang couldn't restrain his family, so he deserved to be punished, but he felt that the emperor punished people while expressing the deep love between the emperor and his ministers was very hypocritical. However, Bai Shan felt that in the adult world there were always more hypocrisy than truth, and he was used to it. Bai Shan makes sense of this kind of thing, but a simple-minded person like Ji Hao doesn't even see it on the surface. He hasn't realized the crisis yet. So it's not tense at all, it's time to play every day, it's time to be happy, except that the mouth is not so cheap, and the life in Yazhu is not much different. Well, still so outspoken. So after sitting down, he looked left and right, frowned and asked Bai Erlang, "Both of you two live in Zhou Man's house?" Feng Zonping on the side was almost choked by the meatballs he just put in his mouth. Yi Xiang was very glad that he didn't eat anything. He put down the tableware and looked at Ji Hao and Bai Erlang. Bai Erlang, however, failed to understand his potential meaning, nodded and said, "Yes, after a while, do you want to go and see the yard where we live?" Alas, when choosing a room, we need brothers and sisters, so let my elder brother be respectful. I chose the main house in the courtyard first, but mine is quite big, so I ask someone to install a large wooden couch by the window, so that I can lie down and read books and eat snacks. Ji Hao frowned and said, "It's not good to borrow it." Crowd. Bai Shan didn't raise his brows, and Bai Erlang asked curiously, "Why not? Don't we all live together all the time?" Ji Hao couldn't help but ask, "Do you often live in each other's house when you are at home?" "That's not true," Bai Erlang said, "Zhou Man has too many family members, and my mother takes care of a lot in Qilai village. If we rent a house, we will most likely live in Bai Shan's house, and his family is at ease. You can also read ghost stories at night. Zhou Man has a few ghost stories that are very well written, especially suitable for reading at night." Crowd. Ji Hao paused for a long time before saying, "It doesn't matter when you were young. Now that you are grown up, isn't it okay to live together?" Bai Erlang finally understood what he meant, rolled his eyes bluntly and said, "What's wrong? The adults are all here, and our husband is here, we are going to study with him, whose house is there? Don't you borrow a few relatives and friends?" Bai Erlang asked him, "Don't you have any borrowed relatives at home?" Also, there really is. This is the capital city. When the big exam comes, who doesn't have a few relatives and friends to live in? Especially since Ankh was opened this year, more relatives and friends came to live at home. See you at 4 p.m. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1483. Feng Zonping held back his laughter and looked sideways at Bai Shan, who was sitting beside him. Seeing that he still didn't speak, he knew that he was sure that Bai Erlang could go back. He smiled and shook his head and asked, "What do you see? What strange novel?" Only then did Bai Shan speak, and he said several books that he had read in the bookstore and thought they were pretty good. Bai Erlang turned his head to look at him and said nothing. Mr. Zhuang, who was sitting not far away, withdrew his gaze, and Mr. Zhang, who was sitting across from him, smiled and said, "You little disciple is also getting smarter." Mr. Zhang does not hide his envy. He also teaches and educates people. He has also accepted apprentices. The friends around him are also not less gentlemen. But to be able to do what Mr. Zhuang did, with 3 such outstanding disciples serving by his side, it was only Mr. Zhuang. Mr. Zhuang smiled, shook his head and said, "It's still too naughty, and some have learned." After the banquet, Shu Yulang raised his glass and toasted all the tables. They knew each other, at least they could match their faces and names. After toasting the wine once, he sat back to his seat. After all, he was not familiar with many people, he was not comfortable, and the guests were not comfortable either. He sat between storekeeper Zhengde and the old man Qiu, and directly pulled store manager Zheng to speak. "Master Zheng, this time I came to the capital with 2 sacks of dried yam tablets, and I even made a small bag at home, full of yam tablets. Bao said that you usually stir fry with soil flour, but frying with wheat bran is also good. Our family tried it. Would you like to see this new cooking method?" Shopkeeper Zheng's eyes brightened slightly, and he asked, "Dr. Zhou Xiaodao told you about this recipe?" Zhou Hulang nodded and smiled, "It's written in a medical book. During the Chinese New Year, my 5th siblings and sister-in-law pondered for a while and figured it out. After spending a lot of yam, they finally got it. Man Bao tried it and said the medicinal properties not bad." The shopkeeper Zhengde smiled and said, "Then give me a bag and go back and try it." Thursday Lang responded with a smile, "Well, I'll pack a bag for you later." He turned around and said to the old man Qiu, "Uncle Qiu, this time I came to the capital, my mother specially asked me to bring my daughter-in-law with me, just to arrange the marriage for Lao Liuko. I brought all the books, and tomorrow I will invite a matchmaker. Come to the door, you must promise." He spoke softly and gave old man Qiu enough face. Old man Qiu also laughed and said happily, "You can ask someone to come to the door first." Shopkeeper Zhengde and others knew that the 2 of them were talking about marriage, and immediately joined in the fun and said, "You are so insincere. Since he begged like this, you should agree to it." That's right," said Dr. Ding with a smile, "let's also take the opportunity to ask for a wedding drink." On the side, Saturday Lang blushed slightly, while Friday Lang looked at his 4th brother with a sigh, feeling that his 4th brother was really getting smoother. A few adults from Yang who are at a certain distance from them are talking about the recruitment of talents in Chongguan Hall. Originally, they didn't want to talk about official business, but the Zhang family's Saburo happened to be on the recruiting list, so they talked about it. Of course, as they chatted, they couldn't help but talk about Master Tang. Erlang, who came to join in the fun from the Sun family, poured a glass of wine and toasted Master Tang, and said with a smile, "Zhai, you are the magistrate of Chang'an County. I'll wait." Master Tang. Yang Hesha couldn't help but chuckle. Master Tang glared at him before picking up the wine glass and touching it to Sun Erlang's wine glass. After drinking, he said, "I want you to take care of me more, read more books when you have nothing to do, and don't go out for horses and fights. The county magistrate is not easy to do, so don't make it difficult for me." Bai Dalan's classmate drank 2 glasses of wine, and after getting a little drunk, he asked, "Who will you go to this year's big exam?" Everyone shook their heads, and Bai Dalan said, "It's only been 2 years since I entered school, and it's still early." But he sighed, "I'm not better than you, I'm 2 years older than you, you haven't got married and have children, so naturally you have time to take it slow, but I can't do it anymore, I don't have any prospects for studying, not only my family, but myself. I feel sorry for my wife and children." Bai Dalan said, "Your family is not short of money, what's wrong with studying for 2 more years? He couldn't understand a little. Although his father also wanted him to be an examiner, he never forced him to come forward immediately. As long as he was still studying at home, he would be very happy. The family background of the classmates is not bad, at least they don't have to worry about food and drink, and they don't have to work to make money. Unlike Jolie, who learns from them, if you don't study quickly to make money, you may have no money to study, so why not study? He drank a glass of wine and comforted him. It's okay, read slowly, it's okay to study for another 2 years before taking the big test. The classmates who were sitting with him laughed and comforted the classmate. Don't worry about it, Bida is not married yet, he is so relaxed, you have both children, what are you worrying about? Baidalan. There was a lot of talk in the front, and Manbao and the others were also seated in the back. Mrs. Zhang came forward to accompany them, and Mrs. Lu only came out to meet everyone, and then went back to the house to play by herself. All the people here today are young girls and daughters-in-law. If she is an old lady, everyone will definitely feel uncomfortable, so only Zheng Shi will accompany her. Zheng's heart is simple, and he is like a child, so he can play with them. After eating and drinking, many people took a break and then left. Manbao first sent away the 3 families of Sun Zhangdu and Lu Lirong, and made an appointment to go to the palace next time to find Princess Mingda and the others to play with. Then there was Miss Fu Er. Manbao loaded her with some of the things that Thursday brought her from home, and said, it's a local specialty of Lujiang County. Maybe you want to eat it? Fu Wenyun took it with a smile, and said, then I'll go back first, and I'll come and play with you when I have time. It is good. When they returned to the backyard, Mrs. Tang and Mrs. Yang were still there, and Zhou Lejun took them to Manbao's room. At this time, the two were leaning on the wooden couch by the window and closing their eyes. The people in front were almost scattered, only a few people who had a good time with Manbao and the others were still there, and even Ji Hao left. They were all acquaintances anyway, so Bai Shan simply took them to the garden, drinking and playing chess in another open house, while resting and talking. Manbao took some herbal tea from the kitchen and put it on the low table, then took off his shoes and sat on the couch. Madame Tang opened her eyes and motioned her to look at Mrs. Kui. Manbao glanced at her and saw that her face was not very good, so she reached out to touch her pulse. She squeezed her eyes, and when she saw it was Manbao, she closed her eyes again. Her maid and grandma stepped forward lightly, took a pillow to cushion her, put a blanket over her, and put an incense burner aside before bowing and retreating outside the screen. Manbao was stunned, turned his head and asked Madame Tang, are the ladies of your aristocratic family so delicate in everyday life? Madame Tang leaned on the couch and said with a smile, where are you going? Because we are here with you, we have deliberately brought fewer people. If we go to someone else's house, the people who follow us will bring twice as many things. Woolen cloth. She raised her chin and asked softly, how is she? See you at 8 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1484. Manbao glanced at Madame Yang's face and whispered, I think too much, I'm a little tired. Manbao was a little puzzled, why is she tired? She doesn't need to go to the ground, and she doesn't need to do other work, right? Madame Tang almost couldn't help laughing, there are a lot of tiring things in this world, and it's not that you only get tired when you go to the ground. After speaking, Madame Tang turned her head to look at Mrs. Kui, who was already asleep, and sighed, actually, she is also difficult, after all, she is a daughter-in-law. Every morning and evening, she will be saved, and there will be a few more guests at home. Busy. Manbao couldn't understand, but she's pregnant, doesn't her mother-in-law feel bad for her? Manbaidao, when my sister-in-law and the others are pregnant, they have to do the lightest work. When the month is light and the month is old, my mother won't let them go to the ground. Brother Yang Shuexiang's family is not short of money, so why bother? Where's your daughter-in-law? Madame Tang smiled and said, this is your humble opinion. In this world, there are mother-in-laws who are as generous as your mother, but there are also mother-in-laws who are strict with rules. Besides, her mother-in-law is not her own mother-in-law. Man Bao really didn't know this, and asked in a low voice, isn't it a kiss? Madame Tang nodded. Master Yang's biological mother passed away early, and now she is her stepmother. Madame Tang thought of something, smiled and said in a low voice, do you know why some people are so close to you? Man Bao, that's not to be at odds with each other, it's not to want to be close to me, but to treat me with courtesy. Madame Tang burst out laughing and said happily, so you know. Man Bao simply sat next to Madame Tang, leaned on the pillow side by side with her, yawned and said, of course I know, I'm not stupid. From last year to now, she has also visited a lot of people, and basically she has visited the Sungi family in the capital. There are people like the Li family who treat her as a guest and invite her to the 100-day banquet. Naturally, there are people who invite her to see a doctor, but only meet people they don't know. Of course, what's more, even if you are not close in your heart, you will do enough etiquette on the face, and you should say hello or say hello. Madame Tang smiled and said, that's because you are very skilled in medicine, especially since you are a female doctor. In the future, female family members will have children, and they will need you when they get sick. Ms. Tang knew Man Bao's growing environment and said directly, don't think that we have no shortage of food, a lot of clothing, and a lot of medicine, but in the event of illness and childbirth, the probability of death is still very high. She said, Yu Tang Swexian, Yang Swexian, and her, the biological mother is all because her body is broken after giving birth, and she has been not well conditioned, and one illness will disappear immediately. So in order to save your life, the courtesy to you comes from original heart, but at this moment they don't need to have children, and they don't get sick, it's a little too early to treat you as a guest, and they're also embarrassed. She sighed, you only think that the life of a farmer is difficult because of lack of clothing and food, but you don't know that the life of the women in the back house is not so easy. When you encounter some intrigue, the danger is no less than the troubled world, and you may die at some point. Already. Man Bao was stunned, could they still kill people in the back house? Madame Tang picked up her lips and said, it's been better in the past 10 years. The concubine in the palace is generous and your majesty respects the queen, so there is no fighting in the harem, and the prince and princess rarely die, so our family's harem is also peaceful. Man Bao was even more shocked, could this have anything to do with the palace? That's natural, Ms. Tang said with a smile, this is the effect of the upper and lower levels. Your majesty respects his first wife, and the queen caresses his children. Naturally, each family takes an example to follow. In the previous dynasty, the harem battles were fierce, and the battles between the descendants of each family were also serious. What do you like to spoil your concubine and kill your wife? Being a mistress is ruthless. If you kill me, I will poison you more, Ms. Tang said in a low voice. The Kui family is a big family, although she is the young lady of the direct branch, but life is not easy, or else I won't show you a few years ago before I can conceive a child. Ms. Tang didn't continue to talk. After all, this is the Kui family's privacy, or a scandal. If you talk too much, it will be annoying. Besides, the Yang family is not very peaceful. Don't look at the fact that Yang Hui loves Yang Hesha very much. He wants money for money, and people to give him. Wherever he wants to be an official, Yang Hui will run it for him, but he really can't say much in the back house. Man Bao glanced at Kui Shi, who was still asleep, remembered something, and quickly asked, Ms. Tang, who does brother Yang's face look like? Madame Tang took a serious look at Man Bao. Seeing that she was simply curious, she smiled and said, like Yang Hoya and his mother. I heard that his mother was pretty when she was young. Man Bao said, Mrs. Yang is also good looking, if they have children and pick their strengths. When Mrs. Tang heard the words, she envied herself, that's really beautiful. The two of them started gossiping about being pretty. Man Bao said dryly, took a sip of tea and continued the conversation, if brother Yang goes out, Mrs. Yang can follow him out, and there should be less trouble. Right. Where is it so easy? Madame Tang said, if he mentions the matter of going out now, she will most likely be asked to stay at home, and then take 2 concubines for Lord Yang and take them out. Mrs. Tang looked at the stunned Man Bao and said meaningfully, this is about children. God's children are the most important. Doesn't this make pregnant women worry about it? It's no wonder that the child can feel better in the mother's belly. Man Bao couldn't understand their logic, but Mrs. Tang said that this is the rule in the big family. Then he added, the Bai family is also a noble family, so their family should have these rules, right? Man Bao shook his head directly, Bai Shan's family doesn't have these rules. Mrs. Tang said happily, you are talking too much now, be careful to slap your face in the future. Man Bao hummed, if he dares to hit me in the face with this, then I will really hit him in the face. When Mrs. Tang heard them quarrel, she couldn't help but wonder, you guys really fought often when you were young? No, Man Bao categorically denied, I'm a girl and I never fight. They're juniors, so they fight. Mrs. Tang was a little suspicious, but didn't ask again, because Kui turned over and opened her eyes in a daze. When she saw the two of them, she closed her eyes again and couldn't help yawning before closing her eyes. Fully open. The sunlight from outside the window shone in, and half of it fell on her body, making her body feel warm. She felt that her bones were all crisp, so she just lay down lazily and asked, the sun is so good, why don't you guys sleep? Mrs. Tang smiled and said, it's so easy to get together, naturally we have to talk, it's still early, will you lie down for a while? See you at 10 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1485. Kui turned his head to look at the hourglass, but couldn't find it for a long time, and asked, what time is it now? Man Bao's consciousness sank into the system and looked at the time and said, it will not be right in another quarter of an hour. Kui Shi was surprised, I have slept for nearly an hour? Why do you think you only narrowed for a while? Madame Tang and Man Bao were also surprised that they kept talking about it for almost an hour. No wonder my mouth feels a little dry. The two of them picked up teacups and drank tea together. Kui looked at the sunlight outside and asked, what about them? The girl waiting outside the door heard it and immediately came in to answer, Master, they are talking in the garden. Kui Shi nodded, and instead of asking her to ask questions, he waved her to step back. She and Man Bao said, it's rare to sleep so well, so I'll stay at your house for a while today. Man Bao said, you guys can have dinner here too. After thinking about it, Mrs. Kui looked at Madame Tang, who smiled and said, I'm free. Apart from her father-in-law, she is the eldest in her family. Unlike Kui's family, she has a mother-in-law on her head. Kui Shi and Man Bao smiled and said, then it's annoying. They had nothing to do all day, and Man Bao simply asked Mrs. Kui, I don't think your appetite is very good, is it serious? Mrs. Kui nodded and sighed, I want to vomit when I look at something nasty. No wonder she didn't look very appetizing at lunch today. Man Bao thought for a while and said, can I think of a few recipes for you to eat? Mrs. Kui nodded again and again, I was just about to tell you, I can't drink the medicine now. The doctor gave me half a bowl of the birth control medicine, but I have to spit out a bowl. Man Bao became worried, so serious. Do I want to give you acupuncture? Kui Shi nodded again and couldn't help but smile, okay. Man Bao said, it's good to tie it every 5 days. I'll go to your house. After thinking about it for a while, Mrs. Kui shook her head, I'd better come to your house. You are so busy every day that you are so tired that you have to run this extra trip. Madame Tang couldn't help laughing and said, I'm afraid you've come up with it yourself, right? Choi smiled and said nothing. Being able to spend less time on the road, Man Bao is naturally the most happy, nodded and said, okay, come here, I will let the kitchen cook a bowl of porridge for you, and I will give you a needle for a while. There is no need for Man Bao to say it in person, just say it and someone will notify you. The kitchen quickly brought a bowl of porridge, and a small plate of pickles was placed on the tray. Kui didn't eat much at noon. She didn't have much appetite when she saw porridge, but after eating a mouthful of porridge and a mouthful of pickled vegetables, her mouth was full of fluids, and her appetite increased. She ate a bowl of porridge, looked at the bowl in her hand and was speechless. The girl who was waiting on the side, Yingyu, was very happy and asked quickly, Madam, do you want another bowl? After thinking about it, Mrs. Kui nodded and handed her the bowl. Yingyu looked at Man Bao with some embarrassment. Man Bao smiled and said, just go to the kitchen to get it. I don't have much else in my house, so I still have enough porridge. A few people watched Mrs. Kui eat 3 bowls of porridge in a row. Madame Tang closed her slightly open mouth and said, do you have a bad appetite? Kui she put down the bowl in embarrassment and said, I don't know what's wrong, but my appetite has improved. She paused and said, your pickles are delicious, crisp and crunchy, and very appetizing. Man Bao glanced at the pickled vegetables in the small bowl and said, this is my sister-in-law's pickling. If you like it, I'll pack a jar for you to bring. But don't just eat this dish, you can also eat other things. If you don't smell fish, then eat some meat soup and egg custard, that's okay too. Yingyu, who was on the side, hurriedly wrote it down. Kui she smiled and said, thank you so much. I thought this kid was greedy and likes to eat other people's food. Man Bao found pen, ink, and paper from the desk beside him to write the menu for her. Mrs. Tang found a fan from somewhere and shook it gently, and leaned up to watch her write. After a while, he couldn't help laughing, your menu is written in detail, but how did I hear that your cooking skills are average? Man Bao said, that's because I haven't learned it before, but I can still memorize recipes. Madame Tang asked, do you still have to memorize the recipe? What are you memorizing? Man Bao said solemnly, all herbs can be used as medicine, and of course the same is true of vegetables. Not only vegetables can be used as medicine, but all kinds of meat also have their own uses, so there is a saying that the diet nourishes the body. If the meal is well matched, it will naturally it is equivalent to a prescription, so you have to memorize the recipe. As for doing it by hand, she actually knows how to do it. After all, most of the dishes in the recipe are boiled and stewed, which is not difficult, as long as you don't pay attention to the taste. Regarding this, Man Bao was also very righteous, don't you have to pay attention to how delicious the medicine is when you take medicine? It's not like drinking it, it's what it tastes like. Mrs. Tang and Mrs. Yang. Mrs. Yang took out the recipe from her hand to Yingyu, and said, okay, let them worry about this kind of thing. Man Bao nodded. Madame Tang also looked back and asked with a fan, I just saw several recipes that I haven't seen before. Where did you get these recipes? I exchanged it with Dr. Ning from the Baohe Medical Center. It was passed down from his family. Man Bao was very proud. This is not alone, but their family directly gave me an annotated recipe. Listening to her very powerful appearance, Mrs. Tang asked in a daze, what did you exchange for him? 110 prescriptions, there are about 20 prescriptions for diseases on it. This is a medical book divided into 5 volumes, but there are a lot of arguments in it, and each disease is different, therefore, only 20 prescriptions were printed in such a thick book. This medical book is her teaching material. After buying the book from the encyclopedia, she simply paid the credits to print a few copies. She likes to use it to exchange things with people. At present, most of the medical books in Manbao's study are bought from encyclopedias, and the rest, except for a few from bookstores, are exchanged with people for habitual reading and then copied, or directly exchanged. Of Madame Tang didn't know that this medical book was easy for her to get, so when she heard it, she couldn't help but nod her forehead. Aren't you a loss? Even if it is a medicated diet, it is a loss if it is replaced by a medicinal formula. Manbao shook his head and said, knowledge is not so valuable. Anyway, they ask me and I have to say, how good it is to change things. It not only saves my time, but also gains. Mrs. Tang. Kui Shi smiled and said, you can think about it? Manbao laughed and said, of course, if I can't think about it, then, how many people who write books, print books, and spread books can't think about it? In fact, what she wants to say is that she can't think about it anymore. How hard is it to think about the encyclopedia that has opened a library for people to borrow and watch? There is endless knowledge in there, and you only need some points to buy it. If only they had such a library here. See you tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1486. Master Tang and Master Yang, they have been eating dinner here before leaving. Manbao and others sent the person to the gate, and then turned to go home after watching the person get on the carriage and leave. Everyone and the concierge closed the door together, and Thursday Lang stretched a lot and said, this matter is finally over. Manbao, how is your fourth sister-in-law? It will take a while, but she has an appetite. As long as she can take medicine and things, she will be fine. I will give her an injection later. Thursday Lang nodded, turned his head and said to Saturday Lang, then tomorrow, I will ask the official media to come to your door to propose a marriage for you. After your sister-in-law is healed, I will officially make an appointment. You will dress up tomorrow, and the store will not be in a hurry to open. Wu Wu Lang said, I was just about to discuss it with you. Now there are more and more things at home, and the sixth child will get married, so he must be very busy, so he can't close the restaurant every time he takes a break. I mean to hire a chef who can cook on the stove. Even if there is something wrong with the sixth, the store can be turned around. Now the store has hired helpers to cook, run errands and collect bills, but they are not very good at craftsmanship. In order not to spoil the signboard, every Saturday when Lang has something to do, the store can only be temporarily closed, which is actually not good. Zhou Lang thought about it for a while, and Wu Zhou must know more about the restaurant than him, so he waved his hand and said, let's discuss it. Friday Lang looked at Saturday Lang. After thinking about it, Saturday Lang nodded and said, then fifth brother, go find it. Friday Lang should come down. Zhou Lishong was counting the gifts he received today. They have been counting the gifts since they sent off the guests in the afternoon, and now they are almost done. Zhou Lijun took a pen and made an account book, and showed it to Manbao when he was done. I have written down what gifts each family has given. Mrs. Lu said that I will write it down. In the future, human relations will follow this. Manbao nodded, you can call the shots. Zhou Lijun holds all the account books at home, including the tea that she just sold. Manbao walked around the yard and found that Zhou Lishong had already finished the work. She had nothing else to do except give the fourth sister-in-law acupuncture, so she simply went to give Fang's acupuncture. The blood on Fang's face slowly returned. Although he was still thin, his complexion was good, and the gray and white aura on his body disappeared, and he looked like a living person. After Manbao collected the needles, he went back to his yard. Bai Shan was still in the yard. When she saw her coming out, he nodded with Shiro Lang and left with her. Standing at the gate of the courtyard, Shu Youlang watched the two walk back from the corridor side by side. He felt a little uncomfortable. He and Man Bao belonged to the same family, right? Bai Shan said, Your Majesty seems to intend to reorganize the Imperial Physician's office. I don't know if it is necessary to tidy up the Imperial Physician's office as we did in the book above. If so, do you want to go in? Man Bao was also about to tell him about this. When he heard this, he was surprised. How did you know? Bai Shandao, at noon, I heard Lu Huan say that his grandfather has been losing a lot of hair recently. He wants me to ask you if you have a way to grow your hair. He wants to show his filial piety. Bai Shan smiled and said, I heard that His Majesty pressed the Ministry of Household to give out some money to expand the Chongguan Pavilion for the Crown Prince. I asked Swexian Yang in the afternoon. Swexian Yang said, on the surface he said yes. It was given to Kongwengan, but more importantly, it was for the reorganization of the Imperial Physician's office. Bai Shan thoughtfully said, listen to senior brother Yang, this time His Majesty plans to set up medical offices in all the prefectures. Such expenses are not small. Man Bao lowered his voice and said, Eunuch Wu also told me today, and said that His Majesty wants to leave this matter to the Crown Prince. Bai Shan thought thoughtfully, it's a good thing to do this well, and it's a good way for the prince to consolidate his prestige. If it's done badly, it will be a heavy blow to the prince. Man Bao said indifferently, what is there to do without risk? We may also misunderstand the disease by opening the medicine. The prince has His Majesty's support. As long as he is willing to work hard, he can always do it well. Man Bao didn't think that this matter would fail. They didn't dare to say that they were far-sighted, and they dared to say that it was absolutely very good. How could it fail? Bai Shan glanced at her and said, don't say anything else, there are medical bureaus set up in various places. Where do so many medicinal materials come from? Herbs are mostly picked in the wild. If they can't be planted, the sudden increase in output will be exhausting, he said. But if planting is suddenly encouraged, it will squeeze the fertile fields that produce grain, and it's not necessarily a problem to the common people. Good thing. Man Bao's mind finally pulled out from the future development direction of medicine, and began to look at the matter from a holistic perspective. She frowned and said, then we can only take it slowly and choose 1 or 2 states to try to promote it. Bai Shan nodded, I think so too, I just don't know what the prince thinks. He turned his head and said, this book is written by the 3 of us. If the crown prince is too eager for quick success, please persuade you more when you enter the palace, otherwise I am afraid that the names of the 3 of us will be recorded in the book of traitors in 100 years for future generations to watch. Already? Man Bao nodded fiercely again and again. If you look at those history books, you will know that there are always 1 or 2 traitors around the famous Shunjun who are more famous than the Shunjun, and if the monarch is not very faint, it must be the traitor who is wrong. Man Bao shook her shoulders, she didn't want to be a traitor. Another traitor candidate, Bai Erlang, didn't know anything about these, and the next day was still the day of taking a break. Because the day before was too tired, he simply stayed in bed and couldn't get up. Bai Shan was so angry that he pushed open his window, pulled up his curtains and bed tent, and let the sun shine on his window. I don't believe he could fall asleep so bright. Bai Erlang got into the quilt, and Bai Shan said, I've never seen you like this before, so we agreed to go out for a ride together. Bai Erlang simply rolled himself into a silkworm chrysalis and didn't go out when he died. He was really sleepy, and the spring was shining brightly. It was a good season for spring sleepiness. He absolutely refused to admit that it was him who said the day before yesterday that he was going to go out for a green trip. Bai Shan grabbed his quilt and saw that he couldn't pull it off, so he just ignored him, turned around and ran out, and took the thief to go out to play. Since you have already agreed to Feng Zonping and others, how can you miss the appointment? Mrs. Lu asked 2 guards to follow him, while Daji sent Man Bao into the palace. The prince also took a rest today. He had nothing to do early in the morning. He was walking around the garden with the prince. When he saw Man Bao, he nodded at her. After she took the prince's pulse and confirmed that the fetus was fine, he rolled up his sleeves and reached out. Man Bao put his hand on the pulse pillow, checked the pulse and confirmed that there was nothing wrong. He patted his butt and left, letting the princess talk to her. The crown princess took Man Bao's hand and smiled. His Royal Highness knows what you mean, and has promised to give you a handcard. When that time comes, you will bring your disciple into the palace to puncture the needle. See you at 4 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1487. She smiled and said, the side hall you used to see a doctor will be used by you. In addition, His Royal Highness has also set up a set of medicine cabinets there. When that time comes, you will buy some commonly used medicines and put them in. The money will be paid from the East Palace's account. Go up. The Crown Princess paused and said, just as you know, there are many restrictions in the palace, and some medicines cannot enter the harem, so. Man Bao knew that this was to prevent people from harming others after taking the medicine. Even if there was a record of the in and out of the medicine, it would be difficult to find out if there were too many people taking the medicine. In the palace, unless the master is ill, or the palace staff, whether it is a palace maid or a servant, it will be hard to endure. Therefore, all poisonous drugs cannot enter the medicine cabinet of the side hall, but this is also a great merit for the palace servants who are sick and can only survive. For Man Bao, this is also a great convenience for disciples. Although the medicines are limited, at least they can learn to prescribe medicines when they go to the palace to learn acupuncture. And because of restrictions, the flexibility requirements for prescription are also higher. Especially suitable for training Zhenggu. Zhenggu didn't know that his master found him a good way to exercise prescriptions, and he was working in Ji Shitang. His master has Xiu Mu, but he doesn't have it. Not only he doesn't, but Lu Yunu and the others don't either. Before they finish their studies, they have to work when they need to, memorize medical books when they need to memorize medical books, and memorize medicinal materials when they need to memorize medicinal materials. Sanya accidentally misremembered a few medicinal herbs, and at this time she was holding her head and staring desperately at the medicinal herbs that were always misremembered in front of her. Accompanied by Eunuch Wu, Man Bao once again took a look at the side hall used for medical teaching, and focused on the medicine cabinet that was moved in. Eunuch Wu said with a smile, the cot at the top of this place was not removed, and the medicine cabinet was moved in, and then scrubbed, washed, dried, and put in the medicinal materials when they were bought. Man Bao asked curiously, who did you get the medicine list from? After all, many medicines cannot be put in. Eunuch Wu smiled and said, His Royal Highness asked the Taiyuan Hospital to issue the medicine list. Xiao Yuan heard that the prince was going to teach Zhou Xiaodao, and immediately drew out a medicine list, saying that as long as these medicines are enough, it will be enough. Eunuch Wu said with a smile, don't worry, the list has been seen by the Taiyuan Hospital, saying that those medicines are not poisonous, unless they are given to people like cattle. Otherwise there is no medicine that can harm people's bodies. Man Bao opened the medicine list and looked at it, and saw that the beans at the beginning were soybeans, red beans, mung beans, white beans, broad beans, lentils, and other beans. She paused and thought, this is really not poisonous, no matter what, it won't kill people, unless you put a dozen pounds into her mouth at one time, but it's not poisonous, most of it is sustained. The rest of the herbs are some common herbs such as licorice, buplurum, huangjing, etc. From the beginning to the end, she found that there is no such thing as Polygonum multiflorum, because it is slightly poisonous. Man Bao handed the medicine list to Eunuch Wu, nodded and said, that's fine, just follow this. Before entering the palace, the husband told her to give as little advice as possible in the palace, especially the imported things sent to the palace, because it is easy to make mistakes. Do not touch your hands unless necessary. Eunuch Wu received the medicine list, respectfully, and happily sent Man Bao out of the palace. She said that she would take Dr. Lu and the others into the palace to practice acupuncture, and sure enough, she brought them into the palace after the afternoon on the third day. This is a more suitable time that she and Eunuch Wu negotiated. Ji Shitang was busy in the morning, and it was also the busiest time in the palace. Of course, the palace people, who were the main workers, didn't have time to give them needles, so it was set before the right time. Man Bao brought them into the palace ahead of time. Sanya had not yet reached home, so she could only stand at the door of the drugstore and watch them go away, her eyes full of reluctance. Besides Dr. Lu, Dr. Xiao was also waiting for them in the palace. Whether it was Dr. Lu, Dr. Xiao, or Zheng Gu and Zheng Xiao, they all memorized the acupointment maps, but it was a little difficult to find these acupoints accurately. What Man Bao needs to do is to enable them to find every acupuncture point in practice, and also to know what acupuncture point for what disease, how to perform acupuncture. Man Bao usually taught everyone in the side hall, and when the 20 palace servants were all finished, she would go to the back to watch the crown princess, while her 3 disciples and Dr. Xiao left for the finishing touches. The crown princess didn't have morning sickness, just lethargy, so when she passed, she just woke up, Man Bao felt her pulse, said goodbye and left. The time is very short, just ask for a ping and pulse, not to mention prescriptions and needles, sometimes even a doctor's order is not required. It was only 2/4 of an hour before and after, but the crown princess was also very relieved, and she even slept much more at ease at night, and then her stomach began to settle down, growing little by little every day. The prince is very happy to see it every day. Sometimes when he comes back and sees Man Bao, he doesn't care to lie on the belly of the prince and listen. Man Bao is very sure that he has not heard anything, after all, he has not yet reached the age of 4. 4 months, it would be worse if he heard movement. But the prince and his wife obviously didn't care about this, and they had a lot of fun. Every time Man Bao saw this situation, he would wink and want to retreat, but the prince suddenly stopped her and said, the emperor agreed to expand the number of students in Chongquen Hall to 30, and Gu also added Bai Shan's name. Gu is also in charge of the reorganization of the Imperial Physician's office, so prepare to move to the palace when you go back. Man Bao stared, and after a while, he came back to his senses. I want to live in the palace. No, Bai Shan is studying in the Chongquen Museum, why should I enter the palace? The prince emphasized, in order to write medical books. He glanced at her and said, didn't you write that you want to build medical offices in various states? Since you want to teach students, you naturally need textbooks. The medical books in the Taiyuan hospital are very mixed. Just 2 days ago, they said they wanted to teach students something. It was so arguing that I remembered that you once gave Lu Yunu a medical book that you wrote yourself, and if that's the case, then you should write it yourself, and then recruit students to teach when the medical book is finished. He said, the matter of the Imperial Physician's office is one of the important things that the East Palace needs to do next, so you can discuss with the students in the Chongquen Museum and ask them to help you with the writing. Man Bao was dizzy at the news, and he came back to his senses after a while. This matter, then I can't go to Ji Shitang to see a doctor in the future. The prince gave her a sideways glance and said, isn't it enough for so many people in the palace to train you? But this disease is too rare. Man Bao murmured in her heart, but she still didn't recover, so she didn't dare to speak to him. No, the Xiao Yuan of the Taiyuan hospital is the editor-in-chief, you have to listen to him, the prince said, you should discuss this medical book with the imperial doctors. Didn't you say that there are very few books outside? You can read any book. Man Bao was immediately refreshed, really? See you at 8 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1488. The prince nodded, how can there be a fake Jingkaoyuan? But Bai Shan said that Jingkaoyuan can also deceive people. However, Man Bao didn't want to remind the prince of this at the moment, so he only smiled and narrowed his eyes, and nodded immediately to show that she would live up to the prince's entrustment. Who cares, let's talk about the advanced Chongguan Museum, and let's talk about whether the medical book can be repaired later. Is the book so easy to repair? A year or two at the earliest, right? Man Bao smiled and narrowed his eyes. What about Chongguan Museum? She dared to guarantee that in the whole world, only Kui's collection of books could compare with the Chongguan Museum. Chongguan Museum is the place where the prince studied. I heard that in order to cultivate excellent heirs, the emperor piled all the books in the palace into it. It can be said that even the library behind the emperor's own study is not so complete. The Hanlin Academy sometimes had to borrow books from the Chongguan Museum and read them. Man Bao, who had to sneak in even to enter Yazhu Fuxio, narrowed his eyes with a smile, thinking that living in the palace would not be bad. She smiled and said, then I will teach my disciples to read in the side hall in the afternoon. The prince waved his hand and said, if you don't understand, ask Kong Jiju and Yang Heshu. Man Bao said somewhat uncertainly, Yang Heshu. Well, the father and the household were thrown into the East Palace to look at the lonely one. If there is any chores in the future, just go to him. Man Bao was stunned by the series of news until he left the palace. Lu Yunu, Zhenggu, and Xiao Xiao, who were out of the palace with her, looked at her together and saw that she had been shaken back to her senses by the bumpy carriage, so they asked, Master, what's the matter with you? Man Bao smashed his mouth and said to Zhenggu, something has happened. She thought about it for a while. When she left the palace just now, the crown prince didn't seem to say that he wanted to keep it a secret, and eunuch Wu didn't hint, so she waved to Zhenggu and whispered, go back and tell your father that the imperial court will reorganize the imperial physician's office. Zhenggu was at a loss for a moment. The imperial physician's office. Dr. Lu, who had been waiting in the palace, reacted immediately, looked up at Man Bao in surprise, and lowered her voice, isn't it about to start recruiting students? Man Bao said, it's not that fast. The prince said that he should first cultivate the book. I may have to live in the palace in a few days, but don't worry, I told the prince that you will come to the palace in the afternoon to learn acupuncture. Zhenggu finally reacted, swallowed, and asked, if the imperial physician's office is reorganized, can we go in? He vaguely remembered what his father had said. Long ago, when the Taiyuan hospital was still the imperial doctor's office, the imperial doctor's office also had the responsibility of teaching. The students who were taught passed the examination and entered the Taiyuan hospital. Zhenggu's eyes lit up, like two burning lanterns staring at Man Bao. Man Bao thought for a while and said, if you study hard, you should be able to pass the exam. I'm not good at letting you go through the back door. Xiao Xiao also became smart, and asked nervously, Master, will you write the medical book for the assessment? Man Bao said, the prince said that Xiao Yuan Zheng was the editor-in-chief, and I was there to help. That's enough, the three of them have bright eyes together, and their hearts are full of ambitions together. At least they can know a little bit of the inside story, right? What Man Bao wanted to say was not this, but what she wanted to say was, go back and tell your father that after the reorganization of the imperial physician's office, the local medical office will also be established, and the students taught by the imperial physician's office should be placed in local hospitals. Go to the office. Zhenggu stayed for a while, and the first thing he thought was, isn't this trying to compete with our pharmacy? Man Bao glanced at him lightly and said, you are really stupid. Medicines are cheap, and the number of people who see a doctor will only increase. It's like wheat and flour, when 1 mu of land produces only 1 stone of wheat, everyone is boil wheat porridge and eat it with the husks attached, and when 2 or more quarts of wheat are produced, people learn to remove the husks and grind them into flour to eat. Xiao Xiao looked blank and did not understand. Zheng and Lu Yunu didn't understand either, but they only vaguely understood, but they didn't seem to understand. Seeing that they didn't say a word, Man Bao just assumed they understood, and put them off the car when they got to the fork. She waved at Zheng, remember to tell the shopkeeper, and don't forget that my family grows a lot of medicinal herbs. Zheng responded in a confused manner, and when the carriage left, he regained his senses and looked at Dr. Lu. Do you understand? Dr. Lu shook her head. She decided to go home and ask her grandfather, but she glanced at the carriage that was parked beside her, and said, "Senior brother, would you like to take me home first?" Zheng wanted to refuse, so he was in a hurry to go home and talk to his father, but when he met Lu Yunu's eyes, he didn't have the nerve to refuse a girl's house directly, so his eyes fell on Xiao Xiao, who was on the side. How about I let the third junior brother take you back, and I will ask for another car myself. This car was sent to them by shopkeeper Zhengde when they went to the palace from Jishitang. After all, there was no car for them to rent in the imperial city. If they didn't have a car, they would have to walk out on 2 legs, which was a long way. Dr. Lu asked, "Can you get a car here?" Zheng looked around and found that although there are some shops here, there is really no carriage. He felt a little regretful. "Okay, I'll take you back." The two first sent Lu Yunu back to Liu's house, and then they rushed back to Jishitang. Manager Zhengde was about to leave early when he almost bumped into Zheng at the gate. Seeing that he was so nervous, he raised his heart, grabbed him and asked, "What's the matter? Did you cause trouble in the palace?" It's not good for a child to enter and leave the palace. It seems to be a real success, but he can't help but feel a little scared. Zheng paused for a moment and then controlled his expression. He pulled his father to the backyard, repeated what Man Bao said just now, and then asked, "Father, what does master mean? If there are medical offices in various places, then wouldn't the business of our pharmacy be robbed in the future?" Shopkeeper Zheng's thoughts were interrupted. He glanced at his son, and said lightly, "There are 2 things in this world that people can't control, one is hunger, and the other is sick." He said, "As long as people are hungry, they have to eat, in the same way, as long as people are still sick, they have to take medicine. Do you think there are many people taking medicine now?" Zheng didn't know whether to nod or shake his head. The shopkeeper Zhengde said meaningfully, "Actually, more people can take medicine. Don't worry, even if the medical office opens, it will not rob us of Jishitang's business. On the contrary, it may make us Jishitang's business better business." While talking, the shopkeeper Zhengde suddenly figured it out. He stroked his beard and said with a smile, "I wonder if the person who proposed to reorganize the imperial physician's office thought about this. Did he do it intentionally or unintentionally?" He didn't know that the documents from the imperial physician's office were written by Man Bao and Bai Shan and Bai Cheng. He was thinking that when he went back, he would have to ask his younger brother to find out who the document was and which company he planned to send to the imperial physician in the future. Department of Medicine. By the way, give medicine. See you later. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1489. Shopkeeper Zheng's eyes brightened, and he clapped his hands. "I almost forgot about this. Dr. Zhou asked you to tell me that her family grows a lot of medicinal herbs." Zheng nodded blankly. "Yes, didn't you know that her family sells medicinal herbs? Last time, Thursday, Lang gave you a bag of yam tablets made in a new way." The shopkeeper Zhengde turned around. "By the way, I have to find Shizuo Lang, he is in charge of their family's sales of medicine. You go." "Forget it, don't go, you are her apprentice, just be a good apprentice, don't get involved in these things," Xiao Xiao, don't go to Xiao Xiao, Xiao Ding, go to Zhuji restaurant in the outer city to find Zhou Chuang, and say I'll invite him to dinner and drink in the evening. Man Bao jumped out of the carriage and ran to the yard. Mrs. Fang and Mrs. Lu were sitting on the porch making clothes. The three children were playing on the spread-out mats in the yard. Mrs. Zheng was playing with them with a rattle in hand. Seeing Man Bao running in, Zheng Shi was slightly embarrassed to withdraw her hand, as if she was a little embarrassed to play a rattle at her age. Aunt Zheng, Man Bao called out to Mrs. Zheng, and then went to Mrs. Fang, sister-in-law for, where is my fourth brother? Mr. Fang was stunned for a moment and then said, he took people out to see the porcelain, and said that he wanted to go to Shangzhou to transport some porcelain back. I heard that the porcelain in Shangzhou is very beautiful. How about it? Fang Shi looked up at the sun in the sky, estimated the time and said, it should be at the restaurant right now. Zheng Shi gave the rattle to Batu, got up and said with a smile, if you want to find your fourth brother, just ask someone from the family to call. Man Bao nodded, okay, I'll let them call someone. She ran out to give orders, turned around and ran back to the study to find Mr. Chuang. Seeing that she was in such a hurry, Mrs. Fang smiled embarrassedly with Mrs. Zheng, I don't know why this child is in such a hurry. Zheng Shi smiled, she was used to it, it would be strange if these three children were not in a hurry. Man Bao ran to discuss with Mr. Chuang. She felt that this matter was too big, and its importance was no less than when she knew that her father was not her father, and that her own father and mother were killed, and she had to avenge her own father and mother. Thing. Man Bao touched his chest and said, Sir, my heart is beating so fast right now, I feel that His Royal Highness has dug me a very big and deep pit, and the pit is full of my favorite braised pork and braised hoofs. Don't be slow, even Mr. Zhuang was in a trance. It took him a while to find his own voice, so, you want to enter the Chongquen Museum to compose medical books? Man Bao nodded. Mr. Zhuang stared at his disciple as if in a dream. After a while, he reached out and patted her on the head lightly, chuckling softly, but there seemed to be tears in his eyes. The more Mr. Zhuang laughed, the more Coke felt, and finally he couldn't help laughing up to the sky. Man Bao. She looked at Mr. Zhuang with an inexplicable look on her face, feeling even more frightened in her heart. Mr. Zhuang stopped with tears in his eyes, and his heart was like waves that could not stop. After a while, he found his voice, Child, do you know what this means? It means she can read more books and copy more books. Mr. Zhuang almost burst into tears, he grabbed Man Bao's hand and said, this means that you are the same as the Hanlin, and you will be famous in the future, stupid boy, this is cultivating books, cultivating books. Man Bao stared blankly at Mr. Zhuang, not quite understanding. It's just writing a book, didn't Bai Er write it sooner? If she wasn't free, she could actually write. Mr. Zhuang was excited by himself for a while, and when he saw the child's blank face, he obviously didn't understand. Mr. Zhuang couldn't help but paused for a while, then shook his head and laughed, I'm an old teacher, but I still think so much about gains and losses. It's really not right, it shouldn't be, but it's you, you're not surprised. Man Bao tangled, Sir, I'm already shocked, I'm afraid this is a pit. Mr. Zhuang smiled and said, did the prince say that you are only composing medical books? Man Bao recalled for a moment, nodded and said, yes, I can still teach my disciples in the afternoon. That's it, Mr. Zhuang said with a distant gaze, you are composing medical books, not involved in government affairs, and you are doing things to cure diseases and save people, then you will be fine. He withdrew his gaze, fell on Man Bao and said, you just need to remember as usual, after entering the palace, you should listen more and talk less, and don't meddle in internal affairs, that's enough. As for the issue of standing in line, Mr. Zhuang has already given up. Based on her actions in the past 6 months, If she is not from the prince's side, let alone outsiders, Mr. Zhuang himself is a little suspicious. So forget it. Fortunately, she is a doctor, no matter who ascends the throne in the future, as long as she does not propose to open the emperor's head like Hua Tuo, she should be able to live. Thinking of this, Mr. Zhuang continued, when you enter the palace, don't waste your studies and medical skills, especially medical skills. If you have a difficult illness in the capital, you can ask His Highness to come out and take a look. He said, the more famous you are, the better you can live in the future. Listening to Mr. Zhuang's earnest teachings, Man Bao couldn't help but say, what about Bai Shan, he will also enter the Chongquen Museum. Mr. Zhuang shook his head and smiled, he doesn't have to worry about me, he will do it well. Unlike Man Bao, Bai Shanjin is still studying in Chongquen Museum, but he has one more responsibility, which is to accompany the prince to study. But now that the prince is so old, he obviously doesn't need to read with him. Therefore, after Bai Shan and the others enter the library, it is very likely that they will still study in class, just like in the Kuaza school. It's just that he can't go home as freely as he is now, but he has to live in Chongquen Hall, and he can only leave the palace when he has a rest. As for the poor behavior of the prince, when the emperor asked about the guild, it was estimated that they were older than them, and those who were about the same age as the prince were questioned. No way, it's a good thing to be young. Mr. Zhuang comforted Man Bao for a while. Man Bao always felt better when he fell into the pit, and her mood gradually calmed down, and she began to feel that time passed slowly. Bai Shan, why haven't they come back? Mr. Zhuang glanced at the hourglass on the side and smiled, it should be back soon. If you are in a hurry, go to the door and wait. Man Bao immediately got up and ran, then I'll go ahead and wait. Mr. Zhuang, he just said that, can't you just listen to it? Man Bao ran to the side door where carriages often go in and out. Just when she saw Bai Shan and the others' carriages coming in, she rushed forward immediately, only to see that there was a car behind, the curtain was lifted, and Mr. Yang got out of the car. Bai Shan and Bai Erlang jumped out of the car. Before Bai Shan could speak, Bai Erlang rushed up and said, Man Bao, guess what? Man Bao's words were changed to, what's the matter? Bai Erlang's eyes narrowed with joy, Bai Shan and I are going to the Chongquen Museum to read with the prince. Man Bao, there is still you. The addition of the Si-Kinglan language promised to the doctor should be an addition to all the doctors. Over the past few months, everyone has worked hard. Well, there will be another chapter that promises them tomorrow, see you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1490. Bai Erlang, what do you mean? What do you mean there is still me? Man Bao said, Prince didn't tell me that I still have you. Shiro. Bai Shan walked up and asked, did the prince add us to the list? Yang Heshu also came up and said, some were added by the prince, and some were added by the courtiers at their discretion. The three of them looked at him together and asked, Brother Yang, were you there at the time? Yang Heshu shook his head, I'm not here, but my father is. He looked at the three of them with complicated eyes and said, the reason why all three of you are on the list is because of the document about the reorganization of the Imperial Physician's Office, which is signed with the names of the three of you. Bai Shan and Bai Erlang turned their heads to look at Man Bao, you're actually here. Man Bao raised his chest and said proudly, of course I'm here. Not only am I here, but I'm not the same as you. You are here to study, and I'm here to repair. Man Bao was quite proud and said happily, maybe I still have a grade. Yang Heshu even nodded, you have a rank, but before my father left the palace, His Majesty has not decided, so I haven't decided what rank to give you. Mainly, there are no female officials in this dynasty, even if it is just a name, it is not easy to seal it, but if it is not sealed, it would be very embarrassing to let Zhou Man be the white worker emperor. Yang Heshe said, it's better for a medical officer to seal it. There are old examples. The top grade medical woman is of the 8th grade. Taking this example a step further, you can be named a medical officer, but the grade is. He smiled and said, I came to see you today, in addition to asking you some questions, I want to remind you that before your majesty's will has been issued, please go to the empress when you enter the palace next time, the quality is a little higher, and in the future you will enter the Chongguan Museum to repair books, and your words will be heavy. Books are not so easy to repair, think that you can write with a pen? That's called writing a book, not cultivating a book. Sometimes it is more bald to revise a book than to write a book. What content should be taken from the book and what content should not be taken, what should be the proportion of this content. Every item has to be discussed. Jo Man is young and has little qualifications. If she can't be ranked higher than others, she can't even speak in the school book office. Don't think that imperial physicians will not oppress people. In this regard, I am afraid that Xiao Yuanzhen's personal appearance is not very useful. You can see how much credit for revising books is by the scholars in the Hanlin Academy who broke their heads for editing. When Jo Man was just a folk doctor, everyone was willing to sell her face. After all, she was good at medicine, jewelry, and the credit they get. But when she entered the school book office, she was one of the editors, and she had so much credit. She took some of it, and others could share less. Of course, those who have the heart to take credit naturally also want to cultivate books, but to be honest, there is no one who can ignore the credit. It is him, since he has received this task, he must think of meritorious service. And he and Jo Man are naturally in the same group, whether it is for himself or for his friends, he has to remind her, the book of the Imperial Physician's Office is from you, the higher your grade, the more the Imperial Physician's Office will be able to take care of it. Develop according to your wishes. Man Bao thought, it seems that I haven't been in the palace for a long time to ask the Empress for a pulse of peace. Then I will go to the palace again tomorrow. Yang Heshe nodded. So the four of them moved to the study room, met with Mr. Zhuang and sat down together. The three parties exchanged news for a while, which made up the matter. Of course, no one's news was as comprehensive as Yang Heshe's. Obviously the prince is also a party, but he only told Man Bao 2 points, and did not say other important news. But Yang is different from the book. Although many things are also recounted by Yang Haoyi, what Yang Haoyi said can be detailed. Only then did a few people know that in fact, the matter of the Chongguan Museum and the Imperial Physician's Office has been under discussion, but it has not been decided. When Hoji's case was sentenced before, the ministers reluctantly agreed to recruit talents from the Prince Chongguan Pavilion, but cut off more than half of the list he brought up. Chongguan Hall was only established in this dynasty, and the quota for students was 20 at the beginning. And the current prince is the only one who can honestly study in the Chongguan Museum. After all, the former emperor was the emperor who rebelled. Now, he has been the prince for a few months before becoming the emperor, and he is the prince. At that time, my son could run all over the ground, and he had made great achievements in battle, and he did not need to go to Chongguan Hall to study. Precisely because it is the first one, all kinds of rules are not fixed. When the prince was young, the 20 students in the Chongguan Hall were all his companions, and they were all selected from the families of royal relatives and third-rank Beijing officials and above. Sujian was one of them back then, and he was the one who had the best time with the prince. Later, some of these students scattered to various places to become officials after they completed their studies, some of them were disabled and could only go home to inherit the title, and some of them entered the East Palace as a prince's official. Then all the students in Chongguan Hall dispersed, leaving only the prince as a student. There is no way, if he doesn't study well, the emperor is worried, and sends him a strict teacher every once in a while, and points out that he can produce a high-ranking apprentice. As a result, The prince got angry with these teachers one after another, and even Kong Jiju, who had taught him since his enlightenment, ran away. At this moment, he wants to recruit talents, but he has drawn a large group of people on the list. The courtiers looked at him and didn't think he was recruiting companions, but recruiting confidants. Looking at the list he has drawn down, it is like drawing in all the descendants of imperial relatives, noble families, and Beijing officials above the fourth rank of the middle class. Not to mention the courtiers, the emperor couldn't help but have a headache. This is simply outright partisanship. However, the emperor was not angry at all, just a little tired, and removed all the unsuitable people. After asking his opinion, he began to rebuild the team of the East Palace for him. No one thought that the prince really wanted to recruit so many people, including the emperor. They thought he was using this as a warning and revenge on King Gong, or was he just throwing a tantrum? But this time, the anger was on the right track, and he didn't go straight to Prince Gong's mansion in Luozhu to beat someone, so the emperor pinched his nose and recognized it. Bai Shan and the others who were recruited from the Kuazi Academy were relatively young, and the main responsibility of entering the Changguan Museum was really to accompany them. The prince and those who were personally selected by the emperor went to the officials of the East Palace and the prince's confidants, and they were regarded as the prince's team. So pick and choose. This morning, the bosses took the prince and talked again in the Taiji Hall, and finally settled on the list. By the way, we have decided on the affairs of Changguan Museum. He is still an old acquaintance of the prince, and his teacher since childhood, Kong Jiju. See you at 4 p.m.